Those of you who have just joined us, my name is Leah Swanberg. I'm the founder of Egg Helpers. And not only am I the owner of a donor agency, I myself have had the unique experience of being an egg donor when egg donation wasn't as prevalent or popular as it is now in Canada. My first egg donation was nearly 20 years ago and significantly changed my life in terms of how I viewed family, how I viewed my ability to help people in this world become parents, which I know for so many and many of you who are watching is really the only unfulfilled dream, the last check on a bucket list, the sort of the completion for you is finding a donor in order to be able to build your family. And so I want to start at the beginning. So you're on this webinar, you're thinking, yeah, I'm 45 years old. The doctor has told me I need to have an egg donor. Or I am on medication that limits my ability to go through the stimulation process to get enough eggs to get embryos. I have a genetic condition that cannot be tested for through the genetic testing of embryos. And so for that reason, I need a donor. Or we're a same-sex male couple and we need an egg donor and a surrogate to have a child. And so each of you who is on this webinar has a unique story, a unique path to how you've gotten here. And what's so important for myself as an agency owner or anyone that you are connecting with, it's for us to know what you need and how you want to manage the process, as I said. And so the first step is figuring out what your journey is going to look like. You're here on the path and we're going to get to a baby. How are we going to get there? And everyone has a different temperature check on that in terms of who this person, how they will get, how these eggs will become embryos, how they will be implanted into you or to your surrogate, and how you will grow your family. And so I want to start off by suggesting that we want to work backwards. And when I say we want to work backwards, it means we want to think about this child that you'll have. We want to daydream for a moment about the child that will exist in this world and you as their parents, because you will be their parents, whether they are born through egg donation, sperm donation, a combination of both, whether they are carried by a surrogate or by you. You will be raising this child or children and they will be yours. And they will look to you as mom or dad or papa or, fill in the blank there. And so when we think about this child, we really want to think about how they came to be. And so we work backwards and we say, okay, so, my plan is I'm going to carry the baby. So, okay, so then we know we just need an egg donor. Or my plan is that I'm going to have a surrogate and an egg donor. And so our suggestion always is to find your people first. So we know that we need eggs. So are we going to have a friend donate? And that can be really lovely. A sister, a cousin, someone that we know. And how do we know if that person could be our donor? If you haven't been to a fertility clinic because you just know you need the donor and possibly a surrogate, the first step would be to take your friend, sister, cousin to a fertility clinic. And we'd love to recommend some great clinics. And we would also, if you have a clinic, any agency that you partner with should really be comfortable working there as long as that clinic works with egg donors. So you bring your friend and that person goes through some testing. So whether it is a friend or an anonymous donor or a known donor, so a friend, so a known donor or an anonymous donor, or you are purchasing eggs through an egg bank, Um, the process of screening a donor in Canada is the same. So there will be genetic testing, there will be a psychosocial assessment of the donor, there will be an ultrasound to look at her antral follicle count, or how many sort of follicles are there, knowing that there would be an egg possibly in each one. They'll take a medical history to ensure that there aren't any inheritable diseases that could be passed on to your child that wouldn't sort of be someone in your family, or anyways, right? We all have inheritable diseases, but what are we comfortable exposing our unborn child to in terms of inheritable diseases? They are also going to test her for drug use, nicotine use. While many egg donors or people in Canada are using cannabis recreationally, we need to know that that person can discontinue use. If they're on any medication, is that safe to use during an egg donation? All of that's really important. So when you're thinking, oh, I'll ask my friend, just knowing that there is that piece of asking is very different than that person becoming. Of donors that we, as an agency in Canada, the largest agency in Canada, only, I believe it's 3 out of 10 donors that we send to a fertility clinic pass that initial screening. So if you see a donor on Egg Helper's website, they've passed that initial piece. They've done their initial blood work, and we know that they are a suitable candidate for egg donation. And so it is important to look at that, what that screening process is, what this person is going through to help you become a parent. So, that is one option, is the sister, cousin, friend. The next one is to go through an agency like Egg Helpers, or, another agency. If you don't live in Canada and you're just, watching this webinar, and there's, an agency in your community, although our donors do travel to, the US and Australia and, wherever the intended parents are, to decide whether or not you would want to have a known donor or an anonymous donor. And, when I started out talking about your child that you're raising, is having information around where did I come from important to you? And for some people, it is vital. For many people, and Aaliyah will pop into the chat or send this to you later with the recording, the donor conceived people registry. There's all types of organizations that support donor conceived people who, in most cases, did not know that they were donor conceived, and found out through going for testing, or someone reaching out to them based on a 23andMe ancestry type of test. And so while we know that anonymity is offered through egg donation, we also know that it is very difficult for anonymity to exist in today's society. So an anonymous donor would be someone that you don't know. You sign an agreement with, identified only by a donor ID and intended parent ID number. You will not meet that person. You will have information on them based on the profile that the donor agency, such as Egg Helpers, would offer, which would talk about her education, her hobbies, if she has children, her health. You'd have a understanding that she passed a psychosocial assessment at the fertility clinic, and that's it. You would sign that. She would sign a consent form at the clinic stating that she understands that once these eggs are retrieved, that they are no longer hers, and that they become yours as the commissioning person or commissioning couple or intended parents. And I would say about 20% of egg donations that go through Egg Helpers, or that I'm aware of, are anonymous. And while we truly believe in known donation, and I'll tell you a story about why that has become so important to me, we also respect that not all people of all backgrounds have the ability in their communities to share how their children were born. Not everyone has the privilege that I do as a white person living in Canada who could or may build their family through egg donation. And culturally, that would be okay for me. And so we respect and value everyone's beliefs and how they come to the decision of working with an egg donor and whether that is anonymous or not. I will share with you, though, that personally, doing 23andMe, I was contacted by someone who was donor conceived, and I was their donor through an anonymous donation, because 20 years ago was very different. I don't know that known donation was so available. And this person did not know that they were donor conceived. And so it was quite jarring. And I truly believe that had they known all along, it would be a part of their story, not a secret that was hidden. And I also know that's not easy, and not everybody's up for that. And so I only mention it as a personal experience, having been a donor. I will also say that I've donated 6 times, and that is the first time that's happened. I will also say that my 3 adult daughters, who I'm extremely proud of, are all egg donors. They have been in known and anonymous donations, and we share the same belief as donors that this gift or this egg donation, while it's amazing to help someone else, it is also about what we gain as people, knowing that we've given someone the gift that we have the privilege to experience every Sunday around the table, having big meals, having big conversations. You know, that for us is immeasurable. And if we can give someone that, then of course, yeah, we would. Like, for donors, it is either I have the greatest kids, I want to share that with someone, or I'm part of the greatest family, I want to share that with someone. And that truly is the motivation of donors, in Canada or anywhere. Whether you are working with a donor who is paid in the US or in a commercial place in the world, that doesn't change. We can all work more hours and make more money. Egg donation is so sacred and so important. And if anyone believes it is about money, they are very misled. It is about giving someone the amazing gift that you've experienced as a mom, or the amazing gift that you've experienced as a daughter. And I stand behind that more than any other piece of information that I know of around egg donation. So, is this person a friend? Are they an anonymous donor? Or are they a known donor? Is this someone that you identify through an agency, and the agency says, hey, you're reviewing the profiles and it says known, and you've decided to know the donor? Well, I've had intended parents say, well, I'd like to know her, but I don't want her to know who I am. And it doesn't work that way. And I've had people go, well, I want to know her, but not yet. Well, it doesn't really work that way either. Although there are some donations that they call semi-known, or open ID, where the donor is available when your child turns age of majority, 18, 21, depending upon where you live. And we have had more people contact us after their child is born to say, hey, I know I said I wanted to wait. I can't wait to thank this person. And I say that only because, in 18 years, I know we'll still be in business. You'll be able to contact us, and we hope and we'll make best efforts to contact your donor. And really, the best way to know who she is to know who she is, or know who they are, all along. So there is that semi-known. But if you know the donor and if you select a known donor, her name will be on the legal agreement. Your name will be on the legal agreement. You will likely meet, be introduced by email, Zoom, Skype, begin communicating. And my favorite pictures ever are of intended parents at the retrieval with their donor. It really is so sweet to see, while the donor is showing up for you as intended parents, that you're able to show up for and be present for her during that time, whether it's in person, on Skype, on Zoom, if you live in a different part of the world or part of Canada. But it really is sweet. And I would say 80% of people go that route. Now, I get questions all the time about, my fertility clinic says that they only use banked eggs. What does that mean? So banked eggs are eggs that are already frozen. So an egg donor has gone through a retrieval. The eggs are there and accessible by intended parents. And it's an absolutely amazing option for someone who has the surrogate already, because we're working backwards, but they already have the surrogate. Maybe they've had some unsuccessful attempts and they really want to be able to move forward quickly, as the surrogate has a very strict timeline. Or people who have opted into OHIP funding, or they have a time constraint of some type and they aren't too concerned about a known donor. So they go that route. Or I guess, and many clinics in Canada are not going through fresh IVF cycles. They are instead, working with egg banks in the US. As well, I guess I'll make the announcement here. We've slowly started to announce. We've also started an Egg Bank Canada. We are so excited to have the only egg bank in Canada thus far. And our egg bank is an open ID or known donor bank. So just as you would be introduced to intended parents, or intended parents would be introduced to their donor, you can also do that through our egg bank. And we are so proud of that for the donors who have identified themselves as known, or donors who have said, if the people want to meet me, I'd be open to that. And we are so excited about that. And so if you are at a clinic that only works with banked eggs and says, well, we work with, these banks in the US and it's anonymous. And I always say we take ourselves with us everywhere, including fertility treatments. You can say, hey, I want to know this person. So how do I do that with banked eggs? And if they say you can't, then you're with the wrong egg bank and you're with the wrong clinic. This journey is about you building your family, building your motherhood, fatherhood story, and finding people in your community, whether it's the lawyer, whether it's the fertility clinic, whether it's the agency. These people work for you, including me. I work for you and do, what you want to do, given that it's, within the law. We're not paying our egg donors. You can't pay her. You can't skip the line. If someone else has already selected a donor and you would like to work with that donor, you will have to wait to see if she wants to donate again. But we want to make sure that you are taking yourself with her or with you. And when I talk about that, I would say like 15 years ago, we had a lot of clients who were going to Ukraine or India to build their families. And, I have a surrogacy agency. So most of that was surrogacy, and they needed egg donors as well. And, so people would report back to me and they would say, well, I know it's really important that I have a donor contract. And I said, yeah, donor contract's important, and making sure that the donor has her own lawyer. I remember you telling me that. Yes, donors need to understand what they're doing. And they're bright, brilliant, amazing people. And legally, they need to have the opportunity, or they need to have an opportunity to speak to a lawyer. That is important. That is an important piece of their process. And so we say, take yourself with you. And so I would, coach intended parents to say to the agency in India, hey, I want my donor to talk to a lawyer. Well, no, she doesn't need a lawyer. She's fine. No, she's going to speak to a lawyer if I'm going to be the recipient couple or recipient person. I want to make sure she understands, and in those communities, of course, it is a compensated model. And also I want to make sure she's getting her money, and I think that's very reasonable. And so if you are pursuing egg donation in Mexico, in Ukraine, in Colombia, while it may not be required, I'm going to highly recommend it. And so, we find the donor, we figure that out, and then we sort of bring in our people. So we bring in the lawyer. So if you live outside of Canada and you're accessing surrogacy in Canada and you're working with an egg donor, what questions do you need to ask? You need to ask a lawyer, either in Canada who will refer you, or ask a lawyer where you live. So if you live in the Netherlands, we know that the law is being proposed currently around having a known donor, that your child will have the opportunity to reach back and find out more about their genetic beginnings. And I think that's so important. If you are in other parts of Europe, in the UK, we know that the child's best interest trumps, and that the courts there believe it is in your child's best interest to be able to have access to who their genetic contributor was. And so speaking with a lawyer in Canada, they will automatically suggest talking to a lawyer in your jurisdiction, and they'll have some great recommendations. So having the lawyer, asking the legal questions to ensure that you are protected and safe, and that you know how to proceed through the egg donor process. And then the next piece is, if you don't have a fertility clinic, asking the egg donor agency that you're working with, egg helpers, whomever, to refer you to a clinic. And if you're selecting a donor first, which many people do, I suggest selecting a clinic in her community if possible. I mean, listen, if she lives in the Northwest Territories, we're going to suggest a clinic in Toronto. If she lives in Winnipeg, we're going to suggest a clinic in Toronto. Nova Scotia, clinic in Toronto. But if she lives in Vancouver, there are amazing fertility clinics in Vancouver or on Vancouver Island that we may suggest for you. And so really sort of figuring out what comes first, the chicken or the egg. I say, what comes first, the clinic or the egg? Are you tied into a clinic that you believe is the right fit? If so, then we find an egg donor in your community, or we explain to you, or the agency would explain to you, that the cost of the donor's travel could be significantly high, several $1,000s to have her, sort of parked at the clinic for a couple of weeks before the retrieval. So agency or donor, agency or agency donor, again, agency egg agency, clinic, lawyer, all of those people are the key. The most important piece, of course, is the donor, is finding someone that fits for you. I'm going to leave a pause for any questions. You can pop them into the chat on, here we go. I have a question. Pina, yes, it is possible to view the donors on the Egg Helpers website. If you go to egghelpers.com, you can register for a username, and there are amazing donors. I'm super proud of the diversity of our donors. We really work at creating community and having donors from all types of backgrounds in Canada available on our database. So please definitely go check that out. So I'll give another minute for any other questions that may come up for you at this point. Okay, I want to get to the next piece, which is, for me, really vital to this process. How do you select this person? What is important to you in terms of a donor? If you're in a partnered relationship, my suggestion is always the same. Each of you register on the website of whatever donor agency you're working with, Egg Helpers or whatever. You register and you take your laptops or your phones and you go, one of you's in the living room, one of you's downstairs or in the bedroom or whatever. And you start searching through the database and you pick top 5 each. Come back together and see if any of those 5 fit. Typically 1 or 2 does, and that's the donor, right? If you are, blonde people and you would like to have a blonde donor, please know that that's normal. It is normal to want to have a child that looks like you. And if you want a child who does not look like you, that's normal too. It is such a personal decision in terms of how you select a donor. And so when we look at people when I talk to people around the donor process and how to select, often it is, the little things, when I say, well, why did you pick the donor you did? Um, well, she's a social work student and I'm a social worker. And so I felt like we'd have something in common, or that, we'd be kind of the same people, or I'm an artist and the donor is, a writer. And so I felt like there was some connection there. And so as you begin to think about who this donor is, it's really important to think about who you are. And for so many people who have been struggling with infertility for a really long time, that person is deep down underneath medications and unsuccessful transfers and being told they need a donor and all of the stuff that comes along with that it becomes quite difficult. Becomes quite difficult to know who you are, what makes you you. So I say that so that you can begin to search. And often people have a journal, and I say to them, put your timer on for 5 minutes and write all the things you need to write about selecting a donor. And it might not be tied up with a bow. It might be, this sucks. I hate this. I wanted my own genes. I wanted my own genetic child. Da, 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 da. And I'd like her to have blonde hair. And I'd like her to have dimples like my grandmother. And I'd like her to be tall because I wish I was. Or I would like her to play an instrument because I always want to learn one, or because I play 10 of them. We often hear, I'm looking for someone very smart. And I challenge that belief, because smart is amazing. But what is smart? Is smart, do you mean educated, like in a university? Or do you mean like smart, like her family escaped from Ukraine during the war and she walked for 10 hours to Poland, across the border in Poland to safety, and then flew to Canada as a 20-year-old? Like grit, smart, university, many of these things are interchangeable and very different. So as you're looking for a donor, you'll see, like, you may see a picture of a donor and she has, this blonde hair, and then you read her profile and she actually has this dark hair, and so really sort of getting curious, digging into the profile of a donor, of hair color, eye color, you'll get a snapshot of who she is in terms of parents, grandparents, siblings. You know, my kids have, there's 5 of them. They all look similarly different. And so what is important to you in terms of, is it her background? Is it having a Muslim donor really important? Is having a donor who is Jewish really important? Is it important that she's 100% Chinese? All of these things, we really getting clear about them, and then knowing that when you write out those 2 pages with a timer, and sometimes people will have loud music on to take them kind of out of their head and get them into their body about what this really means for them, that all of the things they thought were important really aren't. They dreamed of being a writer as a kid. They dreamed of being a detective as a kid. They dreamed of being a mother. And so a donor who has kids and is mothering is very interesting, right? Getting curious, not about this donor, but about yourself, and about, like, who am I? And how do I stay safe in this process? How do I, for many people, grieve the fact that this is not going to be a child related to me, and get excited that I will have a child? And so as I talk about that, I hope that that is stirring something in you around finding this person who will genetically connect to your child, or that will be genetically connected to your child. Okay, how much do you think it's cost? It really depends on, we're not a fertility clinic, so we're just the egg donor side. But we'd love to, please email us. We'd love to connect with you to sort of go through, where do you live? Where can we get you a clinic? How can we help you find a donor? Budget and cost is so important as you're going through this process. For many people, they have spent, I think we did like a survey in, I don't know, like 2015 or something, and people had already spent on average $60,000 or more before they got here. And so we know this is your money, and we want to steward it well. We want to make sure that we are taking care of your money. We want to make sure that we're taking care of you in this process, and that there's full transparency. So from the day you start, that, these are the things that can come up. These are the roadblocks. We are dealing with an extremely human process that is beautiful, and an extremely human process that is heartbreaking. Having an egg donor doesn't mean it's going to work. It doesn't mean that the donor is not going to back out. It doesn't mean that you will have a baby in 9 months. It means that you are open to receiving hope, that you are optimistic, that you are ready for this beautiful adventure. And we are ready to partner with you on that. So as you're thinking about it, as it's starting to stir within you, please start taking notes. What is most important about my donor? Is she tall? Is she short? Is she, like I said, dimples like your grandmother? Is she, is she gritty? Is she smart? Is she in university? Does she want to be known to you? Do you want to meet her? Is she unknown to you? Will you purchase eggs so you can start tomorrow? All of these questions, like letting them just settle in for sure. So important. And that is really it. I went over, I thought we'd be 30 minutes. So thank you for those of you who were able to sort of stay for the webinar. If you weren't, you're going to receive a copy of it, or those people will receive a copy of it by email. Thank you again. If anyone has any last minute questions, I'm happy to answer them. If not, just know we will continue to have webinars around egg donation and surrogacy and fertility treatments. And we truly hope that as you're going forward with the process of building your family, you're doing so from a place of empowerment and having been educated on the process, not just these pieces, but, how to be the most informed consumer as you go forward with IVF, as you hire a lawyer, as you, travel abroad to build your family. All of that, so important. So thank you everyone for coming to our webinar. And I look forward to, how does the purchasing process work? I'm not sure what you mean. I think it means banked eggs. Please send us an email and we can send you information about egg donors and through egg banks as well. Is it possible to do a fresh cycle instead of frozen cycle? Absolutely, Kelsey. So, whether people do a fresh cycle, a frozen cycle, we are finding that the majority of our intended parents, I would say 90+% of them, are doing frozen cycles because they're doing PGTA, so the genetic testing of the embryos, and those results take some time to come back. And so typically the embryos are being frozen and then transferred once the PGTA results are back from your fertility clinic, in order to have those results and only be transferring genetically normal embryos. So thank you everyone again, and I look forward to sharing more information with you on one of our other webinars. For more information, visit www.egghelpers.com for more information on our egg donor program. Scott or Sarah will be able to take great care of you as well. Sorry, 2 other questions. Is there a waiting list? So there isn't a waiting list per donor. Some donors are in donations, and if they are on the website, it indicates that they may be interested in donating again. Absolutely, donors choose. Like some donors will say, I would only like to donate to people residing in Canada, outside of Canada, or they've donated previously to someone in France. And this time they say, I don't want to have two children, that are related in the same country. So I'd like to donate to someone from Canada. But all that information would be given to you up front of any donor preferences, or you would see it on their profile. Okay, which passport? So any babies born in Canada through surrogacy will have a Canadian passport, or if you were to travel here and have an egg donor and remain in Canada during your pregnancy, your child would have a Canadian passport to travel home. Excellent. So thank you, everyone, and we will catch up on our next webinar. Thanks so much.